I think the difficult part was that because the pain was invisible, it wasn't a visual cue to people to say, oh, you must be in pain. So I think that was my first hurdle, was people actually believing me and understanding the pain that I was going through. I spiraled deeply into depression and anxiety, feeling like I was a burden, isolating myself. I hit rock bottom.
Pain lives in silence.
Pain lives in families.
Pain lives beneath my mask.
They don't see what it takes to keep going.
But pain is not the whole story.
Pain lives here.
But hope lives here too.
Chronic Pain Australia acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we record today.
A note that this episode discusses chronic pain, difficult healthcare experiences, domestic and family violence, and sexual assault. We will not include graphic descriptions, but some listeners may find these themes distressing. Please listen in a way that feels safest for you. Current support services are included in the episode notes. Pain lives in the body, but it also lives in the distance to the next appointment, the cost of getting there, the experience of not being believed, and the work of trying to hold a life together while searching for answers. But pain also lives in communities, in the people who understand without needing an explanation, who help someone navigate the system and who remind them that they are not alone. Today, we are joined by Kimmy, a chronic pain advocate and carer, a CRPS warrior, a peer mentor and facilitator of CPA's Illawarra Women's Pain Support Group. Kimmy shares her journey to diagnosis, the realities of accessing pain care from the Illawarra, and why peer support should be recognised as an important part of the pain workforce. We'll also discuss her work with women whose experience of chronic pain intersect with domestic violence and sexual assault, and what safer, more connected care could look like. Welcome to today's episode of Pain Lives Here. I'm very excited today to be talking to someone who I find an absolute inspiration in so many ways to how I navigate my experience with chronic pain and being a carer. Welcome, Kimmy. It's great to have you here with me today.
Thanks, Mel.
Kimmy, what is something that surprises with something, I guess, that people may not expect about you? What's that little secret that makes Kimmy Kimmy?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I guess what makes me me is that, I'm a person who has the lived experience of chronic pain, but I have very good control on it through education. And I like to spread that education to people peer to peer and help out people within the community who do suffer from chronic pain.
Kimmy, tell me a little bit about who you are outside of pain and something that people might not expect about you.
I'm a proud Wiradjuri woman who lives on Darwin land. I am married with 3 children with disabilities and I'm their primary carer. I guess something that people wouldn't know about me is that I like to help the community when it comes to chronic pain, people who are stuck in the vicious circle, and I like to help educate them through peer-to-peer support.
Before we delve a little bit more into that importance with the advocacy and the peer support, can you take us back to that beginning of your CRPS journey? What did you first notice? And I guess, what did you realise when it just wasn't resolving?
Yeah, so my initial injury was I snapped my plantar fascia, which is the tendon that runs from your big toe to your heel on the bottom of your foot. And I was in a moon boot for 12 weeks. My doctor told me to come out of the moon boot because everything had repaired, but I kept telling her that, I'm still in so much pain. It's actually more pain than the injury.
When did you realise that it just wasn't sort of resolving as you expected? Like, you go in and you have this initial injury, but then the pain just stays or continues or worsens in your case?
Yeah, so the pain after the injury had healed was more painful than the actual injury itself, and I knew then something wasn't quite right. So I told my doctor that, I was actually in more pain now than what I was with the initial injury. And we did more tests and stuff, and she told me that, it's all healed. I don't understand why. So therefore I started a journey of trying to work out what is actually going on and why am I in all this pain if my injury is healed.
What surprised you the most about that process, trying to find the answers as to why the pain was continuing?
I think the difficult part was that because the pain was invisible, it wasn't a visual cue to people to say, oh, you must be in pain. So I think that was my first hurdle, was people actually believing me and understanding the pain that I was going through. It took lots of tests and, going to different doctors and specialists and nobody understanding what I was going through.
There's a common theme among people when they share their lived experience that because it is invisible, because we can't see pain, particularly chronic pain, that often people don't believe that it's real, that you couldn't possibly be in pain because they can't sort of see anything. During that initial period, what was harder, do you think? The pain itself, your uncertainty about not knowing what was going on, but just trying to navigating that system where there is no clear answer or path forward?
So chronic pain, there's so many variations of it. And it was hard because I didn't feel like I had anyone on my team. I felt like I was alone. And me explaining myself, I felt like I had become a bit of a burden to, my family and friends. And it was the fact that nobody could see it and they just had to take my word for it. And trying to find out, where do I go from here? I didn't know anything about what I was experiencing. The pain was just unbearable. So I was put on painkillers, but every time I asked for them, I felt like I was sort of dismissed a little bit. And then I think just that whole journey, like navigating the health system, is so hard to begin with. But having something that people have to believe in you, that you have this pain, is another story. And then finding who and what is happening to my body so that I can, learn to accept it and find out what, I can do to help manage my pain. I think the whole journey itself, is it's tedious really. And I feel like I'm in regional as well. So it added a bit more pressure and it was harder for me to get answers, see specialists. It just felt like my whole world was caving in.
What was the rough time period between this, you'd healed from the initial injury and then developed this ongoing pain? How long was it before you received a diagnosis?
So the original diagnosis wasn't really a diagnosis. A pain specialist had said to me, look, you possibly could have this, but we're not quite sure. I went back and I seen a orthopedic surgeon, and I was at my, my last straw. I didn't know whether it was in my head or, what was happening within my body. And she walked in and she examined me, she spoke to me, and she said to me straight away, oh, you've got complex regional pain syndrome. I burst into tears because I then knew that what I was feeling was validated. The period from when I first started feeling the chronic pain to my diagnosis was it was about 18 months to 2 years. So I was in limbo that whole time, not knowing what to do, who to speak to. And I spiraled into deep depression and anxiety, and my life pretty much stopped for those 18 months to 2 years.
And that's challenging in its own right. But then you are also, a mum and a carer to 3 children, and there's a significant impact on you, like outside of your own body experience. You know that you have this greater care role as well. And I imagine that added yet another layer of complexity to understanding just really what was happening to you, but not being able to get solid answers for such a long period of time must have been really quite challenging. Part of that, I guess, is access to care in regional areas is difficult. And from 18 months or thereabouts to receive a diagnosis, did treatment start for you quite quickly after that?
Once I received the diagnosis, I then researched it myself. Then I spoke to a pain specialist, and the pain specialist agreed with the diagnosis. And that's when I started asking questions. But I think if I didn't advocate for myself and ask those questions, that I wouldn't be where I am today. I had to really push healthcare workers to be able to tell me, like, can I do this? Is this a possibility? What are my boundaries? That was quite hard while I was still trying to care for 3 children with disabilities and my husband working, 60 hours a week. I tried to at first push my pain down to try ignore it, but obviously I ended up pushing myself into flare-ups, and it was really in my face and I just couldn't ignore it anymore. So I think, navigating that health system, asking those questions and really pushing to go see these health professionals helped. And that's where I sort of worked out, well, this is what I can do, and these are things that need to be adjusted. And I think from there, I started educating myself on chronic pain in a little bit of depth. And that's how I sort of got out of my little rabbit hole.
Was there a particular medical or allied health professional that really was a champion for you in those earlier days?
My GP, she's just amazing. Like, she was the first person to say to me, look, I know I can't see it, but I believe you. So let's start doing something about this. And even to this day, she's like my number one team member on my support areas. I always refer back to her. She's been by my side the whole way, and she was the one who pushed for me to be able to see these professionals as an urgent patient. And she was the one who guided me through who do we see and what do we do, and through that education of this is what you have and this is what it means. And, I can't thank her enough. If I didn't have her, I don't know where I would be today.
It's so difficult for people to access that. You and I both work in this peer support space where we hear these stories every day that a lot of people experiencing pain don't have that advocate for them from the very beginning. And part of what we do in sharing these stories is because we want to increase that awareness around understanding the lived experience. And you said early on, you didn't know if it was real and was it all in your head. Do you feel that not being believed is definitely one of the more negatively impactful elements of pain for people?
Yeah, not being believed is, that's the first boundary, is people not believing what you're going through, what you're feeling, and validating that. And, actually sitting and actively listening to what people with chronic pain have to say and what they're experiencing. I think that is probably the first barrier that, I myself came across. And peer to peer, speaking to people, that's the first thing they say. They say, I need a really good GP who will actually believe me. I need somebody to say, yeah, I believe you, and let's do this, try and find out some answers. So, yeah, it's a massive barrier. And the second barrier to that is just feeling isolated and alone, because nobody experiences the pain you're going through. So they don't really get it. Even if they say, oh, yeah, I understand, I broke my ankle 3 years ago. It's not the same, because that's a short-term pain, whereas this just does not let up. This does not stop. It's a second-by-second management.
Yeah, it is something that I don't think people do understand until, unfortunately, it's an experience that they have themselves or taking care of a loved one. Now, you said you're in a regional area, and I guess for some, they wouldn't really understand what that barrier to regional pain care looks like when we don't have many pain specialists outside of our major city areas. What does it actually look like for somebody in a regional area to kind of manage chronic pain and access to care on a day-by-day, month-by-month sort of process?
To begin with, my GP is 2 hours via car away from me. So, having that 2 hours to go up there and preparing myself to be able to travel that is a big step, because people with chronic pain need to take regular breaks and stretch and stuff. So, that adds time on to my trip as well. And then I've got to get back, but I can't do it all in one day. So therefore, it's staying somewhere up near where my GP is. Then when it comes to specialists, they're very far a few of them down in like a regional area. So I'm in the Illawarra. Yes, we are blessed to have, more specialists than some regional areas. However, to get into these specialists or doctors down here, they are quite expensive. They're a little bit more than if you were in the city. And, accessing those people, my pain specialist is 45 minutes from me in the opposite direction to my doctor. Physiotherapy and things like that, I've had to do via Zoom because I can't get there or it's too far away. The wait lists are exorbitant. And just to get that initial help, it's just really hard. It's tiring. It's a lot of travel. So therefore, I have to organize, well, what do I do with my 3 children while I'm traveling to go and get my own help? So it's looks like a diary with lots and lots of things written in it and time spacing. It costs a lot of money to travel to and from as well, because you've got your petrol and your car, etc., plus your accommodation, plus then your specialist fee. The list just keeps going on.
There's more to it, isn't it, than just jumping in the car and, driving 10 minutes down the road and, seeing the doctor and walking out with a prescription or a quick answer in a short time frame. It makes it quite challenging. And there's so many cogs to, like, even just a single trip alone for so many people. And it's definitely something that was highlighted in the recent sort of pain report statistics around all of these cogs that sit within just a single visit, let alone something that, requires management over potentially a lifetime for so many people. And it's certainly part of, what Chronic Pain Australia are trying to achieve, and unpacking all of that and looking at just how pain impacts such a large part. Just taking your family alone, you have the children to consider, and the fact that, what looks like a simple appointment requires an overnight stay and, 4+ hours in the car. And that's tough on a chronic pain body and adds to that layer of pain. Do you think that means that potentially you try and space out some of those appointments to lessen the impact or the burden across the other elements of life?
So sometimes I feel like all I'm doing is staying in Sydney my whole time. I mean, the past month I've spent probably 70% of my time up in Sydney. And it's trying to schedule either, putting all your specialists on one day, which is really tiring, or trying to space them out. Like you say, I do both. It depends on what I need and how I'm feeling. But when you book the appointments, I don't know how I'm going to feel at that stage. So sometimes I have to cancel appointments because it's just too much travel for myself, too much of a burden, with everything going on, not only like with my chronic pain, but, with my family and looking after the 3 children. And a lot of the time, my son, he misses a lot of school because he's still in school, and I have to take him with me because nobody's here to help him or look after him because my husband works extremely long hours and the other kids work. And, so he misses out on school a lot as well. So his attendance is down. It all sort of just we're adding to the rubbish pile is what I feel like, whether it's money, whether it's specialists, whether it's doctors, whether it's missing school. There's just so many elements to it that you don't really think about when you just say, I have to go and see my specialist. So yeah, it's very tough and it's very tiring.
What does support look like for you though, Kimmy? Who holds you up?
I have a really, really good best friend that, I confide in, but I also facilitate 2 pain support groups here for women in the Illawarra. And yes, I'm facilitating it, but I also get things out of that and we all support one another. And it's really important to have those connections and know that you do have a support network. I also have obviously my family and my doctor. My doctor, she's brilliant. She rings me and just checks in on how we're going and, how is everything? Do you need anything? And yeah, having my family there as well. But with Chronic Pain Australia as well, it's a support network. It feels like a big family. But yeah, we all check in on each other as well and make sure that we're all okay.
That leads me to the next question then. What can those peer support groups offer that even a really compassionate or highly skilled pain professional just can't offer in the same way?
The pain support groups offer a lot. The peer-to-peer, you can't go wrong with peer-to-peer. These are the people that you walk into a room and you don't feel alone because they understand what you're going through because they're going through it as well. You know, the education is not just from a textbook. It's putting that into everyday life. How do I use what I've just learned? I think that's really important as well about these pain support groups, and people who are on that journey are quite alone and they have questions that nobody can answer, and these professionals can give us a technical version, but at the end of the day, how do I put that in my everyday life? Who can I reach out to say, hey, I've learnt pacing, but how do I do that in my everyday life? So these groups, you know, you can't go wrong with peer-to-peer group. It's something that I wanted to start when, you know, I was coming good on my pain journey because I didn't want anyone else to feel alone. I didn't want them to feel that isolation and not being believed like what I went through and go down that rabbit hole. So it's, you know, they all support each other. I support them. They support me. That's just how it works.
When someone first arrives at your Illawarra Woman's pain support group, what is she carrying into that room? What's that big burden for her that most can't see from the outside looking in?
Yeah, so there's quite a bit that, you know, that first person carries into the group, you know, the unknown, the isolation, their trauma in their past, being not understanding their chronic pain and the education around that chronic pain, not having that peer-to-peer and other people understanding, and the fear of, am I going to walk in here and get judged again? But within the first 5 minutes, you just see a weight lifted off their shoulders once we start talking and, you know, sharing experiences and sharing different things. You see that weight lift, and at the end, majority of them will say to me, I'm so glad I took the leap because I'm not isolated anymore and you guys understand me.
It's certainly, you're putting a lot of trust into a room of strangers when you've experienced often a lot of, you know, gaslighting and disbelief from not just family members or the community, but also the treating professionals as well. So it is pretty scary to kind of take that first step, isn't it? And make people feel that they're quite safe in that space. What you've been doing with the peer support work and, you know, mentoring the peer support volunteers as well. What are the ways around sort of chronic pain and trauma and personal safety? Like, what's your experience in how that interacts with a woman in her life?
Yeah, so trauma and mental health impact your chronic pain. And I think knowing people's triggers and, you know, having those private conversations with some of the participants and finding out, hey, is there anything that I need to be aware of? You know, body language, the way that you can see the way they answer, whether they're quite open or whether they're still a little closed off or unsure. We let them know that this is a safe space. It's confidential. Nothing leaves this area. And I think, you know, just reading that body language and understanding that, you know, everybody has their story and that the majority of chronic people have a story behind why and how this came about. And a lot of it is based on trauma. So it's really important to understand, to come from a trauma-informed sort of view, and no judgment. No judgment is probably, like, you know, one of the best things that I teach people. Don't judge people. Everybody's on a journey and it just depends on what path they take.
What is something then that you would like to say here to somebody who's seen the pain support groups advertised either in person or online to take that next step and to come and participate and join in one of those sessions?
It's not what you're expecting. It's not scary. We're all there for the same reason, and everybody has taken that first step that's already in the group. And so when you join, people understand that yes, you are a little anxious and you're a little bit weary, but we're all there to help each other. We're all there to support each other. So taking that leap is definitely worth it. I've had people from my group say, I put this off for a year and then I finally got the courage to come, and they say to me, I should have come a year ago. And I have people who have moved away from the area where I am. One lady moved to Melbourne and said, how can I still join your group? So it speaks for itself. But I think just take that leap. You just introduce yourself. You don't have to tell us anything that you don't want to tell us. You don't have to share anything that you don't want to tell us. It is a safe place. Everything in that group is confidential as well. And yeah, it's a welcoming, inviting environment.
Without identifying anybody, can you describe a change that you've seen where someone has moved from, often isolation into like a real genuine connection that we know is really important?
Yeah, so I have a few ladies that tell me stories of from the first day they walked in to where they are now, and some have been there 6 months, some have been there a year, some have been there, 3 months. A lot of them have told me like they no longer dissociate, which is absolutely massive because these are coming from people who have so much trauma in their background due to, being within the women's center. So they don't no longer dissociate. I've watched people grow with their confidence now, educating them on, how they can help themselves. I've watched people, overcome really, really big steps in their life, and they've all put it back to the peer support group. They've said, if I didn't come here, I wouldn't have that confidence to be able to go do that. And getting back into the community, breaking that isolation, it's the feedback that I get. It makes me really happy. It makes me feel like what I'm doing is the right thing.
It definitely creates a meaningful change to people, and it may not be that it moves them directly back into, say, the workforce or to a role that they may have more actively engaged in previously, but it definitely redefines a sense of purpose for people. And I don't think they realize sometimes just sharing their story really is a support mechanism for somebody else in the room. And that's something I suppose we probably don't thank them enough for sometimes, that sharing their journey themselves is so impactful on everybody in the room. And whilst every story is different, holding each other up really does provide a level of care that I don't think you realize is there. Now, peer support, I think, is something that is neglected in a traditional healthcare setting. It really is a bit more of a nice to have rather than a must have in that sort of informal support network setup. What do you think that framing fails to recognise from a healthcare professional point of view, I suppose?
I think that health professionals don't see it as a therapy or a treatment, or they don't have an understanding of these peer-to-peer groups, of the impact that comes from these groups. I think it's one of the first steps that, people should be looking at is these peer-to-peer support groups, especially while you're awaiting, diagnosis or awaiting seeing a specialist, or, and I find that when they come to these groups, they learn and educate themselves, and we educate them, and we have a framework and stuff. And I find that people are more likely to advocate for themselves with health professionals once they've been in a pain support group and joined and understood. And pain, like the specialists, it's a tough one because, they see everything from a medical point of view, whereas peer-to-peer is really, really, really good for mental health, which then also impacts, your chronic pain. And I think health professionals forget about, we need that peer-to-peer. We need people to understand us. We need people to know where we're coming from. We need that connection. We need to be able to share. We need to be able to share ideas. We need people who can validate what we're going through and just feel that support. Without that support, the isolation is just, it's phenomenal. I would never wish that upon anybody.
It definitely can be very isolating, chronic pain in itself. The one thing I notice from these peer support groups is it allows people to build quite a big toolbox of resources that perhaps you didn't realize were helpful or, could really impact your own pain journey. And I definitely think that is yet another benefit that we won't necessarily see in the health professional setting, is just being able to build out these tools that are necessary to manage that day to day. And, you may find something yourself that's quite helpful that someone else didn't think about that could change their own pain experience. And that's definitely super important. Part of your role as well at Chronic Pain Australia is you mentor and take care of over 100 volunteers. Is that the right number?
Yes. If I had an exact figure, that would be great. But yes, it is over 100. I'm very busy. But yeah, I love what I do. I know that it's sending ripples out and impacting people within the communities. So those numbers I'd love to grow. And that sounds crazy because that's my work and it means more workload for me. But I feel that the more people we have that understand this journey, who understand chronic pain, and then sharing it with our communities peer to peer, like I would have loved for something like that when I was going through my journey. And, I never had that and I didn't know where to look for that. So, yeah, it's actually an honor to have that many people look up to me and for me to mentor them. And I learn from them as well. Some of them will say something and I'm just like, wow, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
And then I'll go and spread that word to the other people. So I love what I do. It's really impactful. It's really important. And it helps me as well because I can understand where other people are coming from. I can understand, I have my story, they have their story. And then when we share those stories, there are similarities, but there's also big differences on, our journey. Yeah, it's really important to, be able to help people within the community.
It can be exhausting is not the right word, but there is an element of give in being a volunteer and running and participating in a support group. But what is something you would share with somebody who maybe is thinking that it would be a lovely way to re-engage again, but concerned about just how much commitment or time or pressure that might put on them? What would be that calming word to have someone really put up their hand and say, I'd love to join you and I'd love to be part of the Chronic Pain Australia peer support team? What is it that we can say to them to get them to come on board?
Really good question. So, volunteering obviously is on your own time. We like to tailor it to what suits you in a way. So we obviously have like a minimum of 12 months commitment unless, pre-discussed. When we onboard people and we train them, it's at their pace. So we don't put any pressure on our volunteers to, you've got to have it done by this time. We've got to have it done by that time. It's approximately 6 hours a month. And you have the opportunity as well when you're, a facilitator to get some extra training under your belt. Chronic Pain Australia have courses come up for, their volunteers and, we can all jump on and do those. And not only does it help when we're facilitating, but it also helps us in our own process and maybe into the future. I just say take the leap. Contact me. You won't regret it.
I agree, you won't regret it. It's quite a validating experience to be able to be a facilitator because you are getting to be a part of someone else's journey, and that is such an honour when somebody shares very often painful part of their life with you, and that really is beautiful. And the spaces are very safe. And when I hold our own meetings, I encourage people when they're ready that maybe they might want to step into that facilitator role as well, because it definitely helped part of my healing process as a carer to be able to facilitate the parent carer sessions that I run, something I guess for me to add in there is that you don't have to live with pain. Being a carer of someone with pain is also an important element of what we do in our peer support groups. So I think that is also important, but you certainly highlighted the fact that it is on your terms as well, because living with pain means that we need to have some flexibility at times and that we understand that. And so we can pace around that, and having co-facilitators is really important when those are available because it helps share their load, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
something that I've noticed within our volunteer group is that when somebody can't turn up, and that's okay, someone else is there to step in and help with that. And that's a beautiful community that has been created around a very necessary part of offering that peer support. So thank you for all that you do for us, Kimmy. We certainly appreciate everything. You go above and beyond and make us all feel very strong and capable in what we're doing. And so thank you for all that you do there. Coming back to you now, if you don't mind, what's one thing you wish people understood about chronic pain?
So first thing is believe what we're saying. And we are masking. We might look okay, but we're very good maskers. We find that, you don't know that we're suffering with the chronic pain because we mask so well. We've learnt to mask. Otherwise, we feel like a burden. We feel like, we've got nothing to offer. So when we are in those flare-ups and we are in pain, don't assume that we're okay, because we're probably not. There's just so many things that I can think of, like even to going and getting your scripts, like put me in the conversation, don't talk about me, specialists as well, active listening, not just listening, active listening. I think that the main thing I probably would highlight is that you aren't alone. We're all here together. And you're more than welcome to join us and to join those support networks and to feel like you belong. So, because pain's a lonely journey. And until you get that peer to peer and reach out, you feel so isolated. I wish I had what my group is when I was going through my journey, because it would have made my story so much different.
Is there a moment for you of real resilience or courage that you're quite proud of that you'd love to share with us?
Yeah, so I spiraled deeply into depression and anxiety, feeling like I was a burden, isolating myself because I felt isolated anyway, pushing everybody away. And I got to rock bottom. I hit rock bottom. And then something inside of me was like, just give it one more chance. Just give it one more chance. And I actually went to my GP, and she didn't know that I was at rock bottom. And I had that open conversation with her, and I said, hey, I mask and I don't really talk about my mental health. And I explained to her at what point I got to. And she just looked at me and she said, let's do something about it. Let's get you out of this hole. And I think that was my turning point. I mean, trying to chop your own foot off is probably your lowest of lows, just to stop the pain. And yeah, that was my turning point, was when I decided I have to do this for me, I have to do this for my family, I have to do this for my friends, and I need to carry on. So yeah, I think that's when everything sort of started clicking with me. I went up to my GP, I made the appointment for the same day. My husband drove me there, and I just laid it all out on the table for her. And she was like, I'm with you. You're not alone. Let's do this together. And I think, to me, having that validation, that's that person that believed me and that support was my turning point of, I've got to get out of this hole.
So if someone's listening now and they're at the start of that journey, what would you want them to know?
You will get there. It takes time. It takes a lot of patience, but it's possible. It's very, very possible. Don't give up. Don't give up. You're not a burden. You're not alone. Reach out. If your family don't understand, if your your friends don't understand, reach out to Chronic Pain Australia, reach out to PainLink. You know, if you need to have those conversations, join a peer support group. We're all there together as one big happy little family. You know, so we are here, and, you know, don't give up, just keep going. You're going to have bad days, you're going to have good days. You know, you're going to have days where you feel like you've hit rock bottom again or that you want to give up. Don't give up.
Do you have a mantra or a quote or even just like a little image that flashes in your mind? What to get you through those hard moments?
I do. So the first thing that flashes into my mind is, you know, my husband and children. And then I actually see the community of like Chronic Pain Australia. And I think I'm letting you down if I not helping myself. And then I start to think about my group. I start to think about, you know, our management team, like everybody I peer mentor. And I make sure that like they're at the forefront, you know, with my family. And I think, yeah, I'm not giving up. Let's keep going.
There's a big element there of how valuable community is, you know, in someone's pain journey. And it's a big element behind Chronic Pain Australia as that leading voice of the lived experience. And as we continue to grow, it's amazing just what community does. And you certainly have said that really well. I want to finish off with one last question, and that is, what gives you hope right now?
I think what gives me hope is that, you know, Chronic Pain Australia are making waves and they're pushing out to the broader community, and people are becoming a little more open to understanding chronic pain, to, you know, that they are slowly recognizing it, and people educating, like professionals educating themselves and starting to ask those questions and finding that there are specialists out there, there are doctors out there, and there are people out there that want to learn about chronic pain and how we feel, and co-designing things to try and help us. Like, it's really important. And I think just, you know, us making waves out into that community and bringing chronic pain to the forefront it's really encouraging for me, because I think to myself, well, if we can reach more and more people and more people can understand, it might make my or anybody else's chronic pain journey easier in the future.
Thank you. Kimmy, thank you for joining us today on Pain Lives Here. We are very grateful at Chronic Pain Australia, and I speak on behalf of all of us that you mentor and graciously give your time and lived experience to us so that we can continue to be stronger and grow more in our role as well as in what we do as facilitators. So thank you very much for sharing your story and for your passion and for continuing to support us. You are a true inspiration to the team here at Chronic Pain Australia. So thank you.
No, thank you, Mel. Thanks for having me, and thank you for being one of my little facilitators that I look after. It's been a pleasure.
Good. Thank you.